When advertising on YouTube, I know that making an authentic video
Second, 2021. I just want to also acknowledge that the new COVID restrictions that have been partially lifted. We can now have up to 20 people in our galley, or is that in the
Callie on the boat.
Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Worship. So the current guidance from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and their interpretation of Dr. Henry's public health order is that the absolute prohibition on people attending formal meetings has been lifted, which means that public are now allowed to attend formal meetings within COVID safety guidelines. And at the City of Merritt, for this building, that means the council chamber has a total capacity of 20 people, all of whom must be wearing masks and engaged in at least some degree of physical distancing at all times. So the limit of 20 includes all elected members and staff. So I think we're hoping for a maximum of about 5 members of the public, but it is still pretty awesome that we can allow people back in for the first time in 7 months.
I would have said it that way, had I have known that. Thank you. So there are no late items, and we now have public input, and there is an ability to have public input, but I don't see anyone.
Thank you, Your Worship. It doesn't appear there are any actual public present in the gallery tonight. We did have 3 emailed public submissions which were printed out and distributed to you and left on the on your desks, and those will of course be entered into the minutes of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. So we will move on then to adoption of the minutes. 4.1, I need to move the minutes of the regular council meeting held June 8th, 2021 be adopted. Christopherson White, and any errors or omissions? All in favor? Opposed, none, carried. So general matters, 5.1, we have the Merritt Centennials, and we have a, sorry, I've forgotten the fellow's name.
Lanki.
Guy Lanki on video.
Yes, Your Worship. Sorry, it's one moment. Sorry.
And we also had a recent email from him as well.
Delegation.
Welcome, and I think we're waiting for you to present.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Brown and members of council. I'm the new president of the Merritt Centennials. I started the season as president or vice president and director of business operations. Our president then, for personal reasons, stepped down about 2 months ago, and I've assumed a president's position at least until the AGM. Well, I will be running for president again at that point in time. The reason for my approaching council is I'd like to make a submission to enable the Centennial Games to have unlimited seating where people can have adult beverages in the arena and sit with their friends instead of being sequestered to the far corner, which is the farthest away from both bathrooms. It's cold in the corner, and people with families won't even go there because then they have to leave their kids somewhere else or what have you. So I've gone around the community. I've asked for input from people all over as to what they feel about it. It was overwhelming, the amount of support that they thought. Number one, they thought that we'd get more fan base, more people would attend, and it would be better for generating revenue for a team that struggles every season. And for this, actually, this is the first season, and as far as 10 seasons that I'm aware of, that the Centennials are actually going to be in the green instead of the red at the end of the season that just passed. So we'd like to continue that trend to become a healthier, viable financial entity of the BC Hockey League. One thing that I can point out is the Merritt Centennials are the only team in the British Columbia Hockey League that doesn't allow fans and patrons to sit anywhere within their arena to enjoy, let's say, a beer or a glass of wine or such and such. So I don't know the reasoning why Merritt's the only team in the league, but I believe that maybe this is the time to, at least on a trial basis for one season, and have the board members review every single board meeting whether this is something that is positive or it's negative. If it's positive, then we would ask to continue. If it's negative, we either fix any issues that would come up or arise, or then we go back to this the way it has been before. I don't foresee that taking place, but I wouldn't rule anything out. I believe you guys all have a piece of paper with the pros and cons that I've done the research on for my submission. The two cons regarding added security, basically what I'd like to do is have more security, volunteers that will have jackets or hoodies that are clearly labeled as event security. So we would have visible security within the arena. Also, for potential waste left behind, we'd like to have numerous bins, labeled bins, for recycling and for garbage disposal. We know that there may be a little bit of an added cost for the cleanup, and the Centennials are prepared to pay for that. I guess what I'd like to do is maybe open up to the floor of the council if they have any questions. But before that, has anybody on council seen the Facebook page from Q101 in the last day regarding this submission? Because obviously Q101 has learned about the submission and has made a Facebook post asking for whether they liked the idea or disliked the idea. And we had one individual who was against it, and I think 27 were in favor. So I guess right now I'd like to open up if anybody has any questions for me that I might be able to answer, or at least research if I can't answer at this point in time.
And Councillor Fehr.
Thanks for the presentation. I'd be interested in hearing if you have any direct knowledge or experience in other communities in BC that do have open alcohol throughout their stadiums, and how that's managed, and what the experience is like there, and how that goes for them.
Absolutely. What I did is I actually reached out to other presidents, owners, and people that look after these venues, and to ask if what kind of problems they have, what kind of security measures they have in place. Most of them don't even have real security measures in place, which kind of surprises me a bit because I would insist on it. But realistically, there's been no major incidents that they can recall. I've spoken to Coquitlam, I've spoken to Vernon, I've spoken to Cranbrook, I've spoken to Prince George, and all of them, they haven't had any problems. It's been lucrative for them, for the team, to help with their bills and stuff like that. Yeah, I haven't heard any negative things, or I would bring that to your attention right now.
Anybody else have a question?
I just have one from the staff side, Guy. Is this in support of an application that you are anticipating making to the province for an expanded liquor license?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. And so when has that application actually already been made?
No, we're waiting to get approval from the city. Now, what we have to do is we have to figure out and try and calculate what kind or the amount of actual liquor sales that we would anticipate, because the license has to be in within the restrictions of what you can only serve what's on your license. So you can't serve anything more than that. So we'd have to figure out what we would presume would be on a nightly basis or monthly basis as to what we'd be selling.
I think that's excellent, and I can say from a staff perspective, I don't think there's going to be any overarching concern with what you're proposing, and I think if that brings more people in, it's a great idea. I just want to encourage you when the time comes, because there's just one small portion of the application that we actually end up filling out as the local government for the local government approval portion. But I encourage you to connect with Don MacArthur, and we can make sure that you've got his contact information afterwards, and we can set you up for what that approval process looks like. So
I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Lanki, I understand you've already had the conversation with the RCMP as well.
Yes, and they're prepared to give us a letter with any suggestions or recommendations that they may have for us with respect to, security within the arena and stuff like that. So Kelly Barch, my vice president, has already reached out to the RCMP, and they are in favor, and they will provide a letter for us.
I think it's would be a good thing for the Centennials, both financially and a big plus to their the fans that they draw. And I agree with going over into that corner is a kind of a bit of a pain in the butt, and so I think it's a great thing. I think it's an opportunity for the Centennials to gain some extra funding for themselves, and I support the application.
If I could just say one other thing, we've given some thought to this as well, because the agreement is minor hockey. Their volunteers run the concession, so all concession sales, the proceeds go to minor hockey. So with more people in the building, there's going to be more concession sales, so more money for minor hockey as well.
It sounds like Ms. White has spent time in that corner. Councillor Luck.
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation there, and I agree. I think I support this as well. Just I really like the idea of going to a seasonal trial on there and getting some feedback and see where you sit with that, because we certainly don't want this going sideways at all. And so my only question is, why is this taking so long? What were the obstacles in the past for this, and why hasn't it happened sooner? Just is there something there latent that we don't know about?
Okay, the only thing I can say this from a meeting I had 3 years ago. With the people that ran the team at that time. I had a meeting with them. They were kind of courting me as to see if I would have any interest in purchasing the team. So our signals were mixed there. But what I did do is provide kind of a rough business plan for the team, what I thought would help them to be better off financially. I own an investigation firm. I've had it for 33 years and stuff. So I presented this over lunch, as well as the question of expanded seating for liquor. And basically I was told verbatim, never going to happen. So when I got involved, this is one of the first projects that I wanted to try and bring to City Council. Was this and a 50-50 lottery, which we've secured now with BCLC's approval. So these are the two things that I'm starting with that I can see will generate more funds for the Centennials and for minor hockey.
Question period. This is not debate time. So, Councillor Richard.
With the expanded liquor, would there be more spots that you would actually sell the alcohol from, or would it still be sold on the one end and then people could sit wherever?
No, I've actually spoken with Dave Zackel and Sky McEwen with the city. Dave Zackel has built extra booths inside the arena now, some of them for figure skating, minor hockey, for the Centennials. And what they've agreed to do is even build a couple more. What I would like to have is Beth would like to have the same booth that she's had in the back corner there. And I don't see a problem with that. But what I'm submitting is we'd like to have a booth on each side of the rink, basically where in the same area where the booster booths are. So they're close to the washrooms, they're close to the stairs. When people come in, if they want to grab something, it's just those two booths there. We could have one on each side, so we're not getting too many people congregating in one area. If we spread it out a bit, then we'll have a little bit more distancing.
Sounds like a good idea, instead of having everybody all in one spot.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, I thank you for your presentation. We don't actually, we're not making a motion on this at this point. That will come up at a future time. I suspect next meeting.
Okay, I would like to thank you all for your time and for listening to this proposal. And once again, thank you. Thanks.
Fehr, notice of motion. Can you? And I take it you're going to move this motion?
I will move the motion that council directs staff to research and propose an appropriate land acknowledgement to be used at council meetings.
We need a seconder. Councillor Christopherson. Did you want to speak to your motion?
All I have to say about this really at this time is that I think it's just the timing couldn't be more perfect, although it could have happened in the past. But you know, now is a great time for us to do this, and I just hope that it also leads us into more dialogue, because I think that's key. You know, we can take steps like this that are definitely valid and valuable, but I think the real way forward for meaningful reconciliation with all bands is that we can have discussion, open discussion, and I really hope that you know the bands are on board with that too, and we can all get together more often for meaningful conversations.
Thanks. I wanted to add that I too think it's appropriate timing. It's the right thing to do, especially given the whole Truth and Reconciliation documents. And I've been told I have voted against this in the past, but I have never voted against the land acknowledgement. It was the idea of having it put through as a motion to that I was against. On the other hand, we've been talking about it for a few years, and we haven't done anything about it, so this motion is quite appropriate to get us a kickstart into that process anyways. And I agree with Councillor Fehr. I think it's the right thing. It'll add to the dialogue, and let's just get on with it. Councillor Stockerson.
Yes, I just wanted to add that I believe that consultation with the bands is an integral part of the process to make sure that when we do this, we do it right. I'm in favor.
Seeing no other comments, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. So 6.2 UBCM calls. So I'm going to give this to staff to report on. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship. So obviously at the last meeting of council, one of the things discussed was the upcoming Union of BC Municipalities Conference and the regular calls that are traditionally in-person meetings, but these days calls that take place with the various ministers and ministries. As staff, we requested council to think about ministries that they'd like to talk to and also to make specific requests of. There was a brief discussion at the last meeting as well about some potential staff, some potential discussions which it seemed like good ideas to staff. And we've spent a little more time fleshing that out subsequently. So ultimately at this point, I think we are suggesting that you would want to meet or request calls, and it's worth noting that you won't necessarily get everything you asked for. So last year we were extremely successful. Who knows, maybe we'll get lucky again. But so I think 1, 2, 3, 4, about 6 different calls we're suggesting this time. So the Ministry of the Environment, issues around air quality and the potential for a monitoring station to come to Merritt. Flynn Road, the ministry with the really long name, issues around riverbank erosion, snow monitoring, and advocacy around forest issues. The Ministry of Health, the fact that we've lost 20 complex care beds and all the knock-on impacts that that has as well on the people who are waiting to go into complex care facilities. Modi is, I think, the one that we're most sure what you'd like to talk to them about. That would be Nicola Avenue winter maintenance, cleanup at exit 286, and the potential for sidewalks on Highway 8, the bit which isn't technically in the city, but links the 2 bits of the city, the Downtown Core at exit 286. And then the Ministry of Public Safety, there are always issues around the RCMP review of resources, staffing levels, the provincial municipal split on that. And then finally, the Premier. Last year we had a very successful commitment from him for exit 286 cleanup, but unfortunately one go on that doesn't really do a whole lot, so we'd like to go back for a second go, explain to him a little more about the open latrines, then talk some about the forest industry as well, pricing on timber, the allocations made available for stumpage fees, and also the complex care beds and the knock-on impacts that has. So unless Mr. Smith has anything else to add, I think those are the suggestions that staff had come up with. So if there are any other ministries or topics that council would like to add, then we need to get these requests in about a week from now. It's the end of June is the deadline.
And does anyone feel we've missed a big topic? Councillor Bangu.
Thank you, Mayor. Perhaps Greg did not miss this and I missed it. He was speaking of sidewalks. Were you referring to, is it the south side of Merritt, where we have SO gas station, or sorry, Super Save gas station and so on?
Mr. Smith.
So in that area, any sidewalks would be the responsibility of the municipality because it's within City of Merritt boundaries. I believe the portion that was referenced last time it came up in the conversations in relation to the Palomino lands rezoning was either sidewalks or a bike lane or something to that effect on Highway 8 in the portion that isn't in the City of Merritt. So we can have discussions with Ministry of Transportation at any time to provide that infrastructure, just recognizing that it will be municipal cost for the provision of that infrastructure.
That's actually good to know. That was a question that's been in the air for some time. Who's responsible for it?
Yeah, I don't want to say it can be done. It needs to go through a review with them, but that's a process that we can engage outside of UBCM if we're asking for something that is kind of outside of municipal boundaries. Our hooks are a little bit different.
It is a bit of a safety concern. Folks are having a difficult time reaching downtown from that part of there, and especially the ones in the wheelchairs and such. Thank you.
Well, no, hold on. The part we're looking at is from 286 into probably Coldwater turnoff.
Sure.
There are nobody on wheelchairs.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, I know what he's talking about. I was talking about the area by superseded test.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can add one more comment. Preliminarily, Ministry of Transportation staff have indicated that they are actually open to considering the addition of sidewalks in both of these locations. Again, it comes down to a funding question at that point. And so the ones in the City of Merritt, it's clear where that's going to fall. Your advocacy at UBCM may be around what funding would look like for the portions that are outside the City of Merritt.
Thank you. And we are on UBCM, not the City of Merritt's topics. Councillor Edward.
The only other two that I was maybe thinking was Ministry of Family and Children, with maybe a lot of people having concerns with healthcare and daycare options, because they have some of they were mentioning about some of the services and childcare grants, startups and whatnot. Because I know that a lot of businesses that post-COVID will probably have a harder time getting people back to work and finding staff. Now that places are opening, there's a lot of people looking for people because a lot of people are shy to come back, or maybe they don't have the childcare options. And then the other one was
Can I stop for a minute? Child daycare options, is that not part of Ministry of Health?
well, under Ministry of Children and Family Development continues, like there's a whole section under there. Ministry of
Okay,
Children
so
and
more
Family
appropriate for, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's where I had read it, and then the other one was Housing Minister, of course, always asking about housing supply, referring to our housing assessment. I mean, I know that there's the 2230 Quilchena underway, and that's what, the 44 unit development, but maybe just a thought.
Yeah. This was one of the ones that we had preliminary, I'm going to be honest, when we sat down with the mayor and we were kind of brainstorming ideas. Attorney General is the one that's ultimately responsible for BC housing, so Minister Eby. And so that is presumably, when we're talking about housing, what the reference, who you would be wanting to talk to. I think that there's potential for a conversation. Kind of thank you for the two that they have supported in the City of Merritt. And there's a third that is kind of in the works. And so there's potential for encouragement on that front. We're 100% sure what the ask would be, and that's part of the reason why we didn't bring it forward. But if council feels that this is something that you want to have a conversation about, by all means, I think that there's an opportunity to do that there.
Well, okay. Well, since you're already talking 80, maybe you should also see what's in road sense for road safety, because you're planning on using 6 lights going on the walking plan up through the Diamondville Trail, further down in the information items. And so I thought, well, we can always speak to them about that, see if there's any funding coming or available for safer roads for pedestrians and lighting, because that used to be something that ICBC had as a program, Road Sense BC, and whatnot, that was highly successful in high crash intersections.
Can I clarify whether you're asking us to go through ICBC about that, or?
Well, there is a section.
We're not meeting with the Attorney General, we're meeting with the Solicitor General.
Okay.
So this would be an additional request.
Yeah, and if you look through the full package, there's one that says road sense, and then there's one that has ICBC, and then there's housing. suggestions, but since ICBC used to have a successful program for lighting up unlit intersections, or lighting up, that sounds bad, improving lighting in high-risk intersections and improving the road quality or contributing to road repairs. That's maybe something that we can do, because that's something that's part of our PAT plan, or I'm using the wrong words, but active transportation plan through Dunman Vale. Well, maybe they would help us with some funding for the new lights that we want installed, or something like that for improved safety. So anyway, just a thought.
We can maybe connect with you at another time to find out some of the details, because knowing what our ask is what we need to come up with. But yes, we keep in touch. Anybody else? Have we covered what we need to? Okay. Councillor.
Sorry, highways, we were talking earlier about out at the other exit, 290, and some of the transportation and traffic issues out there. Is that on our list of things to maybe talk about as well with one of the ministers?
No, but it probably could be.
Yeah, because otherwise I think there's an MOH on this.
Yeah.
Right?
The first thing I'll say is you can always have these conversations. I think that if you want, in my opinion, the way they are often the most successful is if you have the discussions at the staff level first, and then once a plan is designed or devised, and then you are then saying, okay, here's what we need in order to make this come to fruition. That's when you often have the best conversations with ministers, because generally the conversation without that would go, we have some traffic problems up in this area. And they say, okay, what would you like us to do about that? Well, we need to do a whole bunch of planning, and then we'll get back and talk to you. Okay, go ahead and do that. And so it can sometimes lead to a little bit awkward conversations, but I will 100% acknowledge that, especially on these long weekends, it can be very congested up in that Wolfway area. So I think that there is nothing wrong with getting together and having the conversation. I will just be candid in saying that it can sometimes be a bit awkward unless you have a good solid ask.
And fair enough on that, I agree like that. So let's not do this next year at the last minute trying to come up with ideas. Can you put that one maybe on for 2022 then maybe? That's how we could do maybe a list for next year.
Well, so that's what we have strategic planning for.
Yeah.
And that's where we would all be in agreement rather than.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that would make it.
But sometimes we're scrambling in the last minute to come up with ideas.
Well,
we do it every year.
We're not scrambling for ideas. We're scrambling for what is our highest priority to take there. And we can go to Ministry of Motive, whatever it's called, at any time. We don't have to wait for UBCM to go there and talk about some of our issues. UBCM is just a convenient way to bring some of our issues that we're currently talking about to the table. But that's definitely on our list. Maybe we have to prioritize it for next year.
So, yeah.
Any other? It doesn't look like it. Okay, I think we've got it. Does that satisfy staff?
Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you. Move on to Unity Cannabis, the Williams Lake First Nations, and can we have staff report, please? Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this, of course, is the application for the Williams Lake First Nation to open a store called Unity Cannabis at 2101 Quilchena Avenue, which is the location of the Adelphi Hotel. Williams Lake presented to Council earlier in the year, and then they made their application to the LCRB, who referred it to Council. The statutory regime in place is that in order for LCRB to progress this application and to even make it a possibility of them issuing a license, is to receive a positive recommendation from Council. Without that positive recommendation, no license can be issued. So a no recommendation whatsoever is the same as a negative recommendation, and it kills the process. The requirement for you is that if you're going to make any recommendation at all, then you have to undergo public consultation, which you requested at a prior council meeting. I think that was May 25th. And so this resulted in leaflets being hand-delivered to neighbours, to the sign being put up in the window of the Adelphi Hotel. There was notices in the Merritt Herald and on the City of Merritt's website. In response to that, the city received 13 submissions prior to Thursday of last week, which were included in the agenda pack, which was dispatched to you on Friday. And subsequent to that, we've had another 3 submissions which came in, which were distributed to you and placed on your desks as part of the public submissions to the meeting tonight. So those are the factors that, so that is the public input that for you to be considered. You are required, if you make any recommendation, to show that you have considered the location of the store and to include the views on the impact this would have on the community and the views of residents. So if you want to make a response, if you want to make any recommendation for, against, or none at all, those are all options to you depending on your views on this application and the public input received. We gave you a background this last time this came on the zoning consideration. There are no issues around the city's buffer zones between parks, cemeteries, schools, etc. There is a potential issue with the daycare, which is currently within the buffer zone, but is in the process of moving out of that location. And there are, at the moment, there are 2 active stores within the City of Merritt. There used to be a cap of 4, but that was removed by you a little while ago. So there is, at this point, no limit on the potential number of stores. So the options available to you, say making a positive recommendation, no recommendation, deferring it, or receiving the consultation for information. So that is then up for you to debate. If you have any questions, they're here.
Any questions for Mr. Lewis? Can I clarify? You said we asked for a public consultation, but this meeting is not about a public consultation.
This isn't a public hearing, Your Worship, but you
Oh,
are...
public consultation, not public hearing. Okay, got you.
So public hearings under the Local Government Act are held for land use applications such as zoning applications, official community plan changes, etc. And they have a particular statutory regime around the way they have to operate, the procedures we have to observe, etc. In this case, you are simply required to seek public opinion, and then there's a whole slew of different ways that you can do this. We went to for the same way that City of Merritt sought input at all the prior applications for cannabis stores within the city. Which involved, as I say, requesting written input through various different means.
Thank you. So we now have a public consultation doesn't require deadlines. So any submission we have up to this date we can receive, or even beyond this date.
Well, you wouldn't be able to receive anything, make a recommendation after anything you received after today if you made a recommendation.
True.
But so yes, as I said, if this was a public hearing under the Local Government Act, then we would say that there needs to be very strict adherence to a particular set of rules. But because you are simply required to gather public input, you can set those rules and you can decide what to do with those rules. So although we did place a deadline in the notice that for people to put in their views by 12 o'clock on Thursday, that was to allow us to collate them and include them in the agenda dispatch. But we also have public submissions on any items on the agenda, and we are allowed to have public showing up in person now. So anybody could have shown up at 6 o'clock and said they wanted to make a input on that. And as chair of the meeting, that's entirely up to you if you want to accept that or not. So we have those 3 written submissions.
Thank you. I would like us to submit, or bring them in, whatever you asked us to do with them. Yes, they're here in front of us, so they're part of this process in my mind. Okay, I'm going to ask for a motion. Do you have a question to staff?
To staff.
Councillor Christopher.
I'm just wondering if you can clarify one of the comments kind of concerned me that came from a citizen, and I'm just wondering if you can clarify. It says Hive Cannabis once had a location approved in Merritt, but instead opened 5 other stores with their licenses once that had been approved here in Merritt. And then Hobo Cannabis then changed their name to Dutch Love and opened 5 stores in downtown Vancouver and 3 in Kelowna. And I'm wondering, is what I think I'm understanding by this is that they've asked for an application in Merritt. We've approved it, then they decided not to build in Merritt, but use that application to get approved in another location. Is that what this means?
So I'm not purporting to be an expert on the provincial licensing process, but I'm happy to share what staff's understanding of this process is. An applicant will apply to the province, and the province goes through quite a robust process. Any of the 2 applicants that are in town will be able to tell you it is very robust in terms of determining whether this vendor, this operator, this business is suitable to operate a retail cannabis store. And as it stands right now, there is a finite number on how many you are allowed to operate once you have approval from the province. You still need to go through the process in each local government where you want to have a store to receive a recommendation from that local government if you are going to be successful operating there. So I think that there's a bit of a misunderstanding in that here, if they want to operate a store in Merritt, they need a recommendation from the city of Merritt. But if they want to operate 5 stores elsewhere, they can do that under the provincial licensing process, but they are still going to need a recommendation from any of those other jurisdictions that they have applied to operate a store in. So in short, one business can operate more than 1 store, but they need to still get the approval of the local jurisdiction to operate each of those stores. So in short, the answer is no. Our giving a recommendation doesn't do anything to give them authorization to operate elsewhere. Maybe
not authorization, but does it signify that, well, these people approved this, so you should approve it? Is that what I'm reading into this?
Each one is considered individually.
Each one is considered on its own merit.
I should say as well, it's not like they need to go through the full kind of review of who their business is each time they make an applicant. So once you get kind of a first approval from the province, it is easier to get applications through for other stores if that community supports that application. So if I've gone through all of the checks, the due diligence in one community, and I want to operate a store in a second community and a third community, they don't make you, you don't have to go through all of those checks and processes. They say, yes, we've already done the due diligence on this business, but we need to go through the local requirements still.
So there is an advantage then to get the first community to approve it.
The provincial process is completely separate from the local process.
I think it is that's a decision.
Does anyone else have anything to say?
Is this questions for staff or
This is questions for staff. To make sure.
Yeah.
We haven't got a motion on the table yet. Councillor Wood.
I don't see anything in any of this literature that was our local First Nation groups consulted.
Yeah.
Ask that, sorry, I missed the question.
Was our local First Nations group consulted?
I don't know that any of us can answer that question because we're not part of the First Nations community. We did mention to this organization that they needed to consult the First Nations.
Well,
but there's no requirement to consult with.
So should you ask for that? So should we not have gotten an answer back for it?
I can't require them to go. I can only ask that they go. And that's what I do.
I understand that, but you did ask. I'm just asking if they brought it back that they did consult them.
We haven't heard that they have brought it back to say, I have consulted with them, but. Okay. I need a motion now to get this on the table so we can debate. I need a mover. Councillor Bangu.
Yes, I'd like to move that we not recommend an additional store in Merritt. I feel this way because I'm afraid that it might saturate the market and hurt the existing establishments. Thank you.
I need a seconder.
Second.
Okay. Anybody want to speak to this? Councillor Richard?
Reading the submissions from a lot of the residents, I was surprised at how many people really had such strong opinions for this, considering that only 2 blocks down there's the other store. But maybe it's just, you know, right in the corner there where a lot of improvement is happening, or a lot of change anyway. I don't know if that's the right word. I think with the new housing development that's happening in Quilchena, I think people are taking note of construction and whatnot, and maybe having more of an opinion. But I think the Adelphi being a building that has history going back some time, I think people remember the barber shop being there, kind of an icon that maybe the other building doesn't have as much of a concern because it's not as historic. I'm not sure what it is, but the view of a lot of people seems to be that they don't want to store there. Maybe it's a concern with how close it is to the bank, or they're trying to have a new image, but people just don't seem to be comfortable. All the letters that I have read seem to be negative and not wanting it. Yet the other store 2 blocks down didn't have the same concern. Maybe some, but not as much. And so I really feel that we really have to listen to the residents in this case, because I haven't really seen a lot of positive. We've seen different members. One letter I think came from Schwackham, and one of the members, I think Ms. Manuel, wrote in and gave us her opinions, and a couple other therapists. And so I think we really have to consider that people have concerns. So I'm not telling businesses what to do, but definitely the submissions that we've seen are not in support of it. Thank you.
Councillor Fehr.
So the province has put us in a position of having to make a choice whether or not we make a recommendation. Based on the public consultation that we asked for and that has been provided, I cannot see any reason to make a recommendation for this application.
Anybody else? I have one more other question for staff. We've heard a lot in this public consultation that there are 2 blocks between these 2 facilities. There's less than 1 block, or a little over 1 block on each corner for 2 liquor stores. We have a requirement that they have to be farther away than 100 meters. And do they meet that mark? So we've got a requirement in our bylaws that state they have to meet the 100 meters. They meet that. And now we're suggesting that we should be doing something different. I'm just not sure. Mr. Lois, I don't know what, did you have a question?
No, Your Worship, I just wanted to confirm the numbers you were asking about. On a rough and ready check on a map, it is approximately 280 metres between the 2 establishments. And as I recall, the zoning bylaw provision, Mr. MacArthur, it's a 100-metre requirement between the 2 stores. So it does exceed the requirement that you placed in your zoning bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor White.
I'd like to say when the liquor stores first came out, they had a similar distance between them, and then the liquor board decided, or the government decided that it was a little too close. So now there's a 1 kilometer distance between liquor stores, which has been in place now for quite some years. So that, I just want to bring that to the attention. That's why there are some liquor stores that are a little closer together, but there is a 1 kilometer distance rule between them.
And can I ask staff if that is still in existence? Do we know? Mr. Lowe?
Mr. Smith?
Mr. Smith?
My understanding is that Councillor White is correct with that.
The 1 kilometer rule was codified in regulations in 2013. It is currently in place.
Thank you. But they don't have any such thing for cannabis? Or is that?
Yeah.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, so a lot of the logic was that the province wanted to empower municipalities to enable their own legislation because there were such divergent views between communities in British Columbia as to the degree of regulation that should be applied. And because of that, that's how they have rolled it out. Whether that's going to change in time, I don't know if any of us here know the answer, but they really did say, municipalities, this is up to you, both on a land use side and on ultimately whether to make a recommendation for these businesses or not. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Luck.
Yeah, sorry, I had another question. I know we had our cap at one time at 4. I see there's still some cities that have caps, but how many licensed outlets do we have now in the city? Is it 3? And this would be the 4th, or do we have?
We don't have a cap anymore.
No, I know we don't have a cap.
Okay.
I mentioned that. I said we don't have it anymore, right?
Sorry.
So that's gone. But how many stores do we have now? We only have the 2?
2.
One here and the one up there by, right? Yeah. So this would be a third of, even if we have only 3, and we're anticipating at least 4 coming to town. So it's been interesting how they've fallen off. I sympathize with some of the letters in here, and I see the same comments about, can't we bring other businesses to town and everything, but that goes to that old question about, a business will come to town if a business wants to come to town. There's nothing that we can do to make businesses come to town. Well, sorry, Mr. McCarthy, there is lots we can do, zoning and OCP and things like that, I'm sorry, which we've done. We've done a lot of things, but we still can't coerce people.
Good catch.
Yeah, call myself. There's a lot of things we can do to bring businesses into our town, just, and bribing them or whatever that takes, and it's unfortunate. The one thing I've always...
We don't bribe.
We don't bribe.
Things they don't.
Whatever it takes. The one thing I did say when I was looking at this, and my feeling about a government store ever coming to a town, I will not support that. What I will, and I've said before, is what I really like to support our local entrepreneurs if they're opening stores in our community rather than somebody from Prince George or Williams Lake or something like that. So I'm having a real struggle with this one because of being free enterprise and feeling that, businesses are meant to open and try to survive, and if they don't, they don't. And that's the way it goes. And I know there are some comments in some of these letters about, well, how can, there's 3 and how they compete. That's not my business. That's not our business as a council or staff to worry about a business if they can compete or not. They have to do that on their own merits and things like that. So I'm really struggling with this one. So I'm going to continue to listen to the debate and try to make up my mind here in the next little bit to see which way I should go on this one. But right now we only have 2 stores. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lewis.
And through your worship to Councillor, just to confirm the numbers on this, there are currently 2 stores in Merritt who have their licenses and are active. That's Quilchena Cannabis at 1937 Quilchena Avenue, and My Buddies at 3320 River Ranch Road. And this Unity Cannabis is the only application currently referred to us from the LCRB. So there's 2 open stores and 1 application under consideration.
All right.
And when we talk about local, how local are you talking? Because I don't think either of these companies actually were Merrittonians or Nicola Valley. One of them came from Summit Lake, I think. But Surrey Lake, thank you, up in the summer. So they're fairly close, but the other one hasn't.
And the 23 Christmas parades.
Councillor Etcher.
Just adding to the comments and everything, I mean, this is especially tough because, as Councillor Luck mentions, we're not here to dictate what businesses can apply for. If a person rents or purchases a building, they should be having a permit to open what they want. Not we don't tell them what to do, despite what people in the public might think. But it is hard because a lot of people are having such opinions about it, and it's interesting that 2 blocks down you can have the same thing, but there it's okay, and on this section they just don't want to see it. And, but that can happen with housing. The new development was built down in the 2200 block of Quilchena, but near the highway, people don't want to see a big tall building right next to the highway, and sometimes it's just what our comfort zone is. So is it the right thing to do? Maybe it isn't, but we just have to look going forward what's good for everyone, I guess, and make that decision. It's hard though, reading a lot of these submissions. You really have to consider everything. Thank you.
And I agree, we have to consider everything. On the other hand, this isn't everybody, this is 13 people. And we all know other people in the community who are for it and who aren't for it. And there are the ones who use it for recreation use, there are ones who use it for medical use. It's not just an entertainment area. And we did remove the cap a while back. And my fears are that if we don't approve this for whatever reason, 13 don't want it, that we may have implications that we may not like. We may not have development. If we go back on our rules and our guidelines, just don't know what the implications are.
I think I understand the overarching concern, but I do really want to emphasize that each decision of council under this process is made on its own merits. So it is wholly possible that maybe another applicant in the future would say, you know what, one just got turned down here. Maybe I'm not going to want to apply, spend my $7,500 only for council to turn it down again. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. But I do think that it's important to look at it and say that each application is considered on its own merits. It's all got its own unique location. And quite honestly, they've been done at different times as well. And so maybe the first ones, people don't know what this looks like yet. And maybe now that there are some in the community, they're saying, okay, we understand what it is. We're happy with what we've got, but maybe we don't need more. And so you're seeing quite a range of opinions, but I really do want to encourage council to focus on the specific application as much as possible, because you are right that this doesn't change the fact that others, 5 more could come and apply tomorrow, and it wouldn't change that, but it does probably mean that when people inquire and ask staff, okay, well, what's council's reaction been so far? And you say, well, there were a number of approvals initially, a couple fell off, a couple proceeded. Most recently, there was an application that came forward. It either was successful or wasn't successful, and we'll provide that information. But it's just important to acknowledge it. It's all going to be on the merits of the individual application.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, and I too agree that it's all individual and shouldn't be precedent setting, but in my world it kind of is. So on that, see no other comments, I'm going to ask the question. All in favor?
Of the motion to not recommend?
Oh, you're right. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, the motion is that we not recommend to the liquor and cannabis regulation brands. All in favor of that motion? And opposed? 3, 4. So the motion is defeated. The motion not to recommend is defeated. So now, do we need a motion to recommend? It's done in the negative. Can we have another one right behind it that says we move to recommend? Or is it just implied?
No, Your Worship. As things currently stand, you've rejected 3-4 the affirmative act of not making a recommendation, but you still have the option of just not doing anything, seeking further information, accepting the report for information, etc. So if somebody would like to move a motion that Council recommend to LCRB that the license be issued, then that would be entirely in order, but that would be necessary in order to make the recommendation to LCRB.
Okay, that's what I thought, so, thank you. So, perhaps we need a motion that says that Council recommend to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch that a non-medical cannabis retail store license be issued to Unity Cannabis, and that Council direct staff to submit the recommendation, including any supporting material to LCRB. Do we have a mover? I'm hearing wheels turning, but it doesn't sound like we have a mover. I'm not sure how to interpret this. We've got a not.
Yeah, go for it, Greg.
Okay, Mr. Lewis. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. If a motion is put on the table which doesn't receive a mover and a seconder, then you have nothing further that you need to do. You can simply move on to the next item, or you can ask if anyone has anything else they would like to move, or it is entirely up to you.
Thank you. Councillor Christopherson.
I'm not sure if I want to make the motion because what I want to ask is for more time for the public to respond. I think we heard from a relatively small group, and I think they had some good points. But I'd like more information from the public.
Are you moving now?
Yes.
Second that.
We have a mover, Christopherson, seconder, Luck, that we request. What? Mr. Lois, can you help us with that?
Thank you, Your Worship. The motion that you passed on May 25th was the Council direct staff to gather residents' views regarding the proposed retail cannabis license at 2101 Quilchena Avenue by requesting written submissions in response to posting public notice at 2101 Quilchena Avenue, issuing notices to residents within 100 feet of the property, and by publishing notices in 2 consecutive editions of the Merritt Herald. So if your intention is to require staff to do something similar to that but more, then I would suggest you want to motion something like the Council direct staff to gather further residents' views regarding the proposed retail cannabis license at 2101 Quilchena Avenue, and then list off the manner in which you would like us to do that, or the time frame over which you would like us to do that.
So that's a possibility that we've got the first part, but not the time frame.
Essentially, our big question is, if you want us to seek further information from residents, how far do you want us to go on that? How much effort would you like us to put in?
I guess that then depends on whether we think that we gave people enough time to respond.
We need a motion for us to be able to speak to that. Can you?
Oh, there's a motion on the table already.
There is a motion on the
Just
table.
want to make sure it's correct.
There is a mover and a seconder. There is a motion on the table.
Yeah, I hate us redoing business that we've done already, but I just don't think that we've got a really good read on the community yet.
You need a time frame in there. That's what Mr. Lois is asking for, a time frame.
The moment, the motion which we heard was the Council direct staff to gather further residents' views, but if you would like to wordsmith that slightly to, say, include either, say, over the course of the next month until the end of, already June 22nd, say, to bring a report back to the July 20th Council meeting, then that would probably be, well, that would essentially double the time period that had been had. So, and then we could advertise further in the Herald and require that the notice in the window goes back up.
I'm sorry to do this, but yes.
I'll accept that.
And you're saying July 20th?
July 20th.
Okay. So that is our motion. Do you have that motion?
that council direct staff to gather further residents' views regarding the proposed retail cannabis license at 2101 Quilchena Avenue by requesting written submissions in response to public notice at 2101 Quilchena Avenue, publishing notices in the Merritt Herald, and to bring a report back on the July 20th council meeting.
Thank you. So that's our motion. Anyone want to speak to this? Councillor Redchard, you have your...
Yes, actually, I think that having this motion is good because I've heard from a couple people that they submitted some information that didn't make the agenda. And so I feel that having this opportunity to have more information will give people to have the information for our next meeting. So that's a good.
Were you going to speak to this?
No.
You're, okay. Councillor Fehr.
No, I can support the idea of getting further consultation from the public. I just doubt that we can really tap into any other different kind of sentiment, and that it will result in an overwhelming response from the public that gives this an easy choice. I think we'll be in the same boat.
Councillor White?
I just wonder, what's the distance that the people have to be given notice, the public has to be given notice? Do you 100 meters or something, you said?
Well, there's no legislative requirement. We don't have a bylaw on it in the same way that we do for public, for land use hearings, but in this case it was 100 feet.
It's 100 feet?
Yeah.
That's not very much. Okay, thanks.
Okay, it looks as if we are done our debate. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And we'll move on to the poverty reduction assessment, and Mr. MacArthur, this is your report.
Thank you, Your Worship. And as you mentioned, this is with regard to the poverty reduction assessment, the final report that is attached to the staff report on council agenda. As mentioned, when we brought forward, when staff brought forward the draft plan at the May 11th hearing, this particular project is a sub-project under the OCP update, where we received a $25,000 grant from UBCM to conduct work related to poverty reduction in the community and use that information to then inform policies within the OCP. So this work has been completed. We did post the draft on the city's website and encouraged feedback from the community, and all of the comments have been incorporated into this plan. We do have a final report submission due to UBCM on June 30th. So we're hoping to have a resolution to receive the report this evening. However, if council feels that additional revisions need to be made or additional engagement needs to happen on this, then we can go back to UBCM and ask for an extension to our deadlines. The report itself includes policy areas around social equity and inclusion, housing and shelter, transportation and active transportation, parks and recreation, income and employment, social and health services, and poverty awareness and education. So it's quite comprehensive in its scope. And each of those policy areas includes action items that would help inform the official community plan, as I mentioned, but also help with future updates to master plans in the city, whether that be the Economic Development Action Plan, the Housing Needs Report, the Active Transportation Plan, the Parks, Recreation and Culture Master Plan, as well as the zoning bylaw. So the recommendations in this document are quite important and will help shape poverty reduction in the city over years to come. So if there's any questions from council, we'd be happy to answer those. And yeah, I'll turn it back over to your worship.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Well, I think this report has some ambitious and concrete plans to improve the lives of individuals and families within the community. It's a move in the right direction towards reducing poverty. This is I highlighted a number of ways that we can work together to lift up and support our neighbors. Councillor Luck.
Yeah, I think it's a great report and everything. There's a few things that have, we're talking, this council's been pretty adamant where we're sitting with housing and things like that. I see that's a huge part of this document. And that is something we can directly control here in the city by looking at trying to do affordable housing for the people in the community, everything like that. Another part of this council has been really strong around economic development, which is huge because you can't have poverty reduction if you don't have jobs. And jobs is a huge piece of our community. We really need to do it. And it's this, for the last discussion about people, can we get more businesses in town? We're working very hard to do that, changing the OCP, changing the zoning bylaws and things like that. So this is a great report. I think all this, as you mentioned, Mr. McCarthy is going to be able to dovetail and work together in this. My only concern about documents is like this and everything. I'm always fearful of senior levels of government downloading to municipalities. And so I just, as long as I'm here, we're going to have to be very careful about that, is that downloading and, especially when it comes to health and medical services. Well, there's not a whole lot of municipality to do around health, and, other than collaborating with the levels of government, providing what they require on a collaborative basis and things like that, and trying to deal with some of those issues. But I just worry about just that downloading piece where we have to start paying for some of those things. And I've mentioned a number of times is that our citizens, taxpayers in this community do not have enough money in their pocket to start looking after some of those services, but very, very integral to having not only a strong, vibrant community, but a healthy community as well. So we just, I guess as we move forward with this document and the other documents we're working with, we just got to be cognizant of that. And as we have our UBCM meetings, which we talked about earlier, and that is that those are the things that we collaborate to make sure that we can be proactive, have the plans in place to be able to go after the provincial and federal governments for funding for any of these services and things like that. And I think we did do a great big step this past year, as I know some people aren't really all that happy with it, but with BC Housing coming along and the Indigenous building for people to move into as well, and working on that piece. That's a huge piece of working with that poverty reduction. So I'm quite proud of a lot of the work that we're doing and the planning department that pulling this document together and really seeing what we have to do to get some things done here. So thank you very much, Mr. McCarthy, for pulling that together and helping us out there. Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
I also really wanted to highlight, I think it's so important right now that, and it dovetails very well with the notice of motion that we had earlier today, particular in the policy 1 area, there's many recommendations in relation to kind of reviewing city programs and how they align with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. And I think that there's some really positive things about reconciliation in this document. And so some of them are not as specific, it's more a general commitment, but I really do want to emphasize that I think that this actually is a bigger step forward than many people will realize, that there's official city policy that is going to be about championing reconciliation, that we are going to look for opportunities, that we are going to review our existing policies and make sure that they reflect the needs of Indigenous peoples. And so I think that I want council to be well aware of that and what this document means, and I think it's a really positive step forward in our community.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Councillor Luck, can I have you turn your mic on? Thank you. And just in line with what Councillor Luck has talked about was the health services and the worry that some of them are going to have to pay maybe premiums or whatever. And I haven't heard of any of that coming through, but we have the loss of 20 complex care beds in our community, and that is a loss to a vulnerable population that will cause, if not dollars, pain and agony to a group that will no longer be able to visit family in the area. So just talking about that, it's our vulnerable population more so than our poverty issue, but it certainly is something that does affect the community overall. Councillor White.
Can I just say something about losing the facility for the
complex care beds?
The complex care beds is that when those people get at that age and to move them, it's absolute trauma on them. My father being in there, I moved him when he was like 90. He's now, and it took him 6 months to settle down and accept where he was living. And now to have to move him again, I'm just dreading it. It's because he was traumatized by that. Anyhow, I just want to mention that.
Yeah, and we may not be able to do anything within the guidelines of this report, but we're taking that issue to UBCM, to the minister.
Well, even if it's for future, for other people,
yeah. So we understand the trauma of our vulnerable population. So I have a motion on the table that council receive the poverty reduction assessment report.
Second.
I think it was Fehr and Luck. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. None. Carried. We move on to 7.1, Bylaw 2317, 2021. I need, is this the adoption of quick report from staff? Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not much more than a couple of lines on this one. You read the bylaw 3 times at the last meeting, so the only thing that this would do would be to do an amendment to the fire department pay scales, and so it's now presented to you for final adoption.
Thank you. And do we have a mover that council adopts fire department remuneration amendment bylaw number 2317, 2021? Councillor Richard, a seconder. Second. Bengu. And anyone want to speak to this? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, none, carried. And again, Mr. Lewis, fire and safety regulations amendment.
Thank you, Your Worship. This one is slightly more technical and all kinds of fun as the bylaw is getting into the weeds of a few things. So you may recall about 20 months ago now, in the early fall, late summer of 2019, you passed new fire safety regulations. One of the major changes to this was, for the first time in several years, it allowed Merrittonians the possibility of having backyard campfires in specifically zoned areas. You then, obviously last year, updated the zoning bylaw 2284, which means we're now in the slightly odd situation where the zones that were done for fire, allowing backyard fire pits, and the zones that we describe in the zoning bylaw are not particularly congruous. So this is predominantly a technical amendment which would update those zoning references. At the same time, it also fixes a number of minor problems with the bylaw, such as inserting definitions for things which didn't exist, correcting some definitions which were incomplete sentences, and so I can laugh about this bylaw, it was one that I drafted in the entirety. And there are some updated section numbers, so good news, only 2 years on I get to fix some of my mistakes if you pass this bylaw. Probably the only thing that we would actually flag as staff for you as we think about campfire issues is on an air quality perspective. You're aware that there is, I think, a air quality monitoring station coming into Merritt in the near future. So there's always the possibility of changing this in future to prohibit campfires again, should you decide that that's something that you would like to do. The bylaw which is currently presented to you is simply a technical update to fix a number of errors which have arisen in the existing bylaw as a result of both drafting errors and the newly adopted zoning bylaw.
Thank you. And do we have questions for staff? Okay. I'm going to ask for a mover that council give first reading to fire and safety regulations amending bylaw number 23/2021. Christopherson and White. And anyone want to speak to this? I'm not speaking to your technical update or your technical issues, but I am speaking to the issue of campfire issues. It's one of the biggest things on the plate lately for people to call into the mayor and say there are issues. I've assured them that we are having air quality monitoring, and we will be checking it when that happens. Right now, we don't really have the ability to determine whether or not the quality is as they say it is, which is not saying they're wrong, but I think that's one of the reasons why we're looking at air quality. And thank you for saying that we can look at reviewing that in the near future. Right now, this is just getting the technical update right. So I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. And that I need a second mover and a seconder that council gives second reading to fire and safety regulations amending bylaw number 23/2021. George Fehr. Anybody want to speak to this one? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. And Councillor Luck, will you on the prevailing side? Thank you. Okay. And the council, I need a mover, seconder, that council give third reading to fire and safety regulations amending bylaw number 23/2021. Luck and Etchart. And anyone want to speak to this? No. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. 8.1, statement of financial information. Mr. Anderson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Today we're just going through the statement of financial information for 2020. So our goal tonight is to approve the City of Merritt statement of financial information for the year end December 31st, 2020, as presented, and authorize the Mayor and the Director of Finance to sign the statement on behalf of the City. So the background on this, it's an annual requirement for municipalities to prepare a statement of financial information for public release. The City's SOFI for 2020 is attached and must be approved by Council, signed and submitted to the province by June 30th. It contains information about remuneration and expenses paid on behalf of Council and staff, amounts listed individually for Council and employees that were paid over $75,000 in 2020. It also includes a listing of suppliers paid, an aggregate total of over $25,000 in 2020. As mentioned, it must be approved in an open meeting and filed by the province, and failure to comply with the requirements could result in penalties. So I'm not going to go through the report in detail, but if there are questions related to any of the sections in the reports, I'll be glad to answer any of those.
Any questions for Mr. Anderson? What you did say in your report is that amounts listed individually for council, regardless of whether we are paid over $75,000 or not. We are part of this report, regardless of what our wages are.
That is correct, Mayor. That none of you are exceeding $75,000, but you are listed nonetheless as part of the requirement of the report.
Just you had them combined with an "and" in your sentence.
Preventing a headline.
I just wanted to get your attention. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So anybody have questions for Mr. Anderson? Councillor Christopherson.
Just a really niggly question.
Here comes the teacher.
I noticed under the elected officials that not all councillors are paid exactly the same stipend. I'm just wondering why that would be.
Through to Councillor Christopherson, that is a good observation. And I see that there are two on there that aren't paid exactly the same stipend, and you are one of them. Well, I'll research that for you, unless Mr. Smith has a quick answer.
We've looked at it. We've looked at it once before, but it has something to do with the being age of retirement or something to that effect. I'm trying not to say this sensitively, but the way, yeah. Anyways, we will absolutely follow up with you with a clarification email. But I know that is the reasoning, but the exact kind of mechanism for how that happens, we can absolutely clarify.
It's not an age discrimination.
You're putting me in an uncomfortable spot over here, Councillor Christopherson, but that's what we found last time. Because I know when this came out last time, I'm thinking, this is crazy. Why is somebody getting paid one more than the other? And that was what the answer was, but the exact mechanism has slipped my mind as to the reasoning for why.
It has to do with the dates of the payroll, pay periods. Councillor Richard.
Well, I did notice that because it's numbers. And I was just thinking that the last number on there should be in with the other two as well because they fit into a similar birth date. And I was noticing that error myself. I didn't want to point it out, but since Councillor Christopherson already brought it up, it's kind of fair game now. But, and then the same with the expenses, as I know that some of us have gone to different events and whatnot and meetings and things like that. So I'm just not sure if the person who drove, the mileage normally gets split up if a few people carpool, but sometimes I kind of look at that and think,
I don't think the mileage gets split out.
Oh, maybe that's
It is
why.
strictly
So the
just
person who actually
drives the
drove
car gets the expense.
looks like they cost the most, but really they might have taken 4 people with me.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I noticed the numbers, that's all. Not that you would expect anything less.
Okay. And Councillor Luck?
Yeah, I was surprised to see it for this year, but I know for last year, but.
Councillor Luck, I'm gonna let you to continue, I just need to.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I was quite surprised to see the differences this year, but for last year, but I think next year, we had a motion here some time ago that council was going to defer or not take their pay raises for this year. And some of us have elected not to do that, so I would there should be a difference next year if any of us have opted to stay in to take in our cost of living wages, right? So there'll be higher wages than what the ones that have opted out of receiving their stipend raise next year, right? So that one I can see, well, this time next year, there should be a difference.
Right, yeah.
Maybe, unless we
If
all decided to opt.
If that was the reason for some of the discrepancy, yes, you're correct.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Wayne, does that might have something to do with the CPP?
I think that's what it is.
When you reach a certain level at the CPP?
Could be one of the two.
Through to Councillor White, it's very likely to do with CPP, age 65, 71, those sort of things, that things kick into place. So it's probably to do with that, but we will do some research and send out an email to council.
Councillor Richard.
What I suspected is that some of us qualify for the group life policy, and you have to be under 65 to be eligible. Because most of the people on here that have the discrepancy have the council group life. Just saying. Not that you would expect me to notice, but I think that's probably what it is.
Except that with group life, we have to have 3 people.
And there are 3 people. Fehr, Fehr, and White.
Okay.
Dun, dun, dun.
Still figure it
Yeah. As long as it's
We digress.
They're making me squirm over here.
No other questions for Mr. Anderson?
Yes, I think that's it. I'm going to have this one nailed for next year. Discrepancy will be figured out well in advance. Are there any
Good
other
idea.
questions?
I don't think so. Okay, thank you. So I need a mover that council approves the City of Merritt statement of financial information for the year ending December 31st, 2020 as presented, and authorizes the mayor and the director of finance and IT to sign the statement on behalf of the city. Luck and Fehr. And anybody want to speak to this issue? Please leave age out of it. All in favor? Approved. Opposed? Carried. Opposed, none. Carried. Thank you. Having trouble speaking, maybe. 8.2, Community Foundation of Canada Healthy Communities Initiative, Mr. MacArthur. This is yours again.
Thank you, Your Worship. And this report is with regard to the round 2 grant funding application for the Healthy Communities Initiative. You may recall that staff came to council at an earlier date back in March, and council directed staff to apply for the round 1 funding for this grant. Staff put forward an application that was with regard to pathway improvement in Rotary and Central Parks. Unfortunately, the city was not successful in receiving that funding, and but there is a round 2, so we're able to apply again. We did have a discussion internally about whether the same application should go forward, but it was decided that based on the types of grant funding projects that are the types of projects that were funded by the grant funding in other communities, which were generally in the $75,000 to $125,000 range, with only one project in BC approved over $200,000 of funding, that a project perhaps at a lower rate would have higher success potentially. That's the hope anyways. So we went through that Rotary and Central Park plan and tried to pare it down to see if we could reduce the cost to the sort of price range that we wanted to apply for, but it was determined that that wasn't technically possible due to the engineering demands of that project. So we did have another project that was shelf ready, which was for the Diamond Vale Bikeway, which was considered for the first round of funding, but ultimately not chosen at that time. And so we looked at this project, and it was determined that we could have this at a lower price point. So that's what we've chosen to move forward with staff, and obviously it's up to council if you'd like us to apply for this grant with this project. Some of the details of this particular plan, you can see an image here on the screen of the proposed route, and this would be phase 1 of the Diamond Vale Bikeway. This is identified in the active transportation plan. It's one of the identified routes that were chosen by the public and council when we developed the active transportation plan. It would start at Spirit Square, run along Granite, and then head south on Blair. Following the alignment of the bus route, the bus route number 3 that circuits through Diamond Vale, along Kootley Avenue, up Douglas, and then to Menzies. So along the route, it would pass by the Diamond Vale Elementary School as well, and you'll notice in your package that the school did provide us a letter of support for this, as well as Canate, because or Ask Wellness, because the route does pass by the 2 buildings there at the corner of Blair and Quilchena, as well as Canate, which also supports the application. So we have some great community partners in support of this. Diamond Vale is certainly a community with a lot of population, a lot of families as well, a lot of kids. So there's certainly a great need for more active transportation infrastructure in that neighborhood. So the total cost of this grant request is $97,000, but with contingency and provisional items, it would be $139,013. There is about $42,000 worth of city funding costs as well, which would be part of our capital costs, line painting and those sorts of things. So, which we would be doing in the course of our capital projects. Yeah, so that's a bit of an overview. If there's any questions on this one, please let us know.
This is not 100% paid grant. Is that why we're putting in our own capital?
Yeah, that we didn't want to go at a higher rate, and we're already doing things like line painting, and so we have identified those costs that we would be doing those. But we wanted to keep the cost as sort of close to that 125,000 that we could, and so we're kind of in that range. I think Mr. Smith has additional comment on that.
Yeah, and the other thing is we really wanted to stay true to what the eligible costs were under the grant program, and so anything that looked like, not that you can't sometimes squeeze it in, but having just been rejected the last go around, we want to try and maximize our chances of success on this one. So this is what's coming after conversations with the grant administrators and internally with our team. So council could certainly provide other direction. It's just that we're designing this one to maximize the chances of actually getting the grant, given we were unsuccessful the first go round.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, thank you. We need a mover. The council directs staff to apply for the Community Foundations of Canada Healthy Communities Initiative, Round 2, for the Diamond Vale Bikeway Phase 1 project, and the council directs staff to oversee project management and the management of funds that are awarded. Richard, Luck, I think. I probably hear him louder.
Why doesn't that surprise me? What?
Okay, and does anyone want to speak to this? Councillor Luck.
Yeah, just a quick comment. You know what's really nice about this is that we didn't get very successful there, but because of the planning that's in place now and the good planning that's in place now, we can pull something off the shelf and we're ready to go right away. And that's huge for what staff has been doing over the last number of months, the last year or so. The planning that's in place now that's been missing for a long, long time, and this is huge. So thank you very much for doing that. Excellent. I fully support that. You bet.
That's a thank you from all of us, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony, and anybody else want to speak to this? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. And 8.3, public attendance at meetings. And Mr. Lois.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is something that I haven't spoken to you about directly since November of last year. So as I indicated at the start of this meeting, it is super exciting and also slightly terrifying from a meeting management perspective. The current Ministry of Municipal Affairs' current interpretation of Dr. Henry's public health orders are that the public may now attend formal meetings that are seated to within a COVID safety guidelines. So this means that we've essentially we've reverted back to the way that we were running meetings from, I want to say, late June to November of last year, where public were allowed to show up. We have to take names and contact information of anyone who appears. Everyone in the chamber, including you all, are required to engage in with some degree of distancing and to wear a mask in order to ensure that there's as much safety as possible. The Ministry of Municipal Affairs do continue to encourage all meetings to be held online, and there is actually new statutory authority to hold all meetings online, whether or not there's a pandemic in future. I participated in a corporate officers forum to discuss this, where I communicated to them all that you would all be so thoroughly enthused about that plan and never come here again. Yeah, I suggested there were a few technical issues with running online-only meetings over the course of the last 18 months. Back in November of last year, we temporarily passed a prohibition in Merritt when essentially the logistics of meetings became somewhat unmanageable, where from mid-November of 2020 to mid-January, no public were allowed to appear in person at our meetings. They had to watch online, and this was a local resolution that we were allowed to pass and still are allowed to pass under Ministerial Order M192. From January until last week, the public attendance was prohibited by provincial health order. However, that has now expired. So as I say, that means we're back in the arrangements we were in until November of last year. So this is your opportunity. If you would like to pass a resolution essentially continuing the way that we have been operating things for, since last November, then you do retain the authority to pass a local prohibition on people attending, so long as the public health order and emergency remains in place. However, on a staff level, we are optimistic that with all the lessons that we learned from last year, all the new preparations that we've made, actually some of the new electronic systems that we've implemented, and with better tracing of contact information, that we hope that we can properly manage in-person attendance with the public being allowed to show up. And again, bearing in mind there is a very hard limit on the number of people who could appear, we hope that if a crowd appears that they will understand when they are either turned away or told that they have to enter in very small groups for specific items. So if you pass the resolution as proposed, the council instructs staff to allow public attendance in person at meetings within the parameter of public health orders and a COVID-19 safety plan, then that's the way we'll be running things. But this is your opportunity if you wish to pass another resolution like you did in November, saying that the public had to watch the meetings online and would not be allowed in until the emergency had passed.
Thank you. Now, does this have anything to do with the public allowed in our building outside of meetings?
No, Your Worship, this is
That's still in restriction?
We are still restricting that at an operational level, but this is an item around the public health order restricting or permitting public attendance at formal meetings.
Okay. Does anybody have questions for Mr. Lewis? Councillor Luck.
Just a little bit more to expand on what you're saying there is, when do you see that happening in Lanapa play? Because I know I've had a few people mentioning comments about that. Why we can only go 9 to 12, whatever it is. Can we see that changing?
Yeah, we are absolutely having conversations about that as a team, and I think that particularly with the next stage, the big challenge for us, of course, is that with our COVID safety plan, having the downstairs kiosk is what's most functional, but that creates some staffing and other challenges that make it a whole lot easier to run the shorter hours. So once we can have people kind of freely come and go up those stairs, it makes it operationally much easier to increase the number of hours that we reopen again. So I do want the public and council to know that it's absolutely something that we're looking at, and as the opportunity presents itself, we'll be back open.
Okay, seeing no other comments, I need a motion. I'm going to go with the one here. The council instructs staff to allow public attendance in person at meetings with the parameters of public health orders and COVID-19 safety plan.
So,
All together?
I've got Christopherson and White. Any comments, debate on this issue?
Not debate, just a call.
Okay.
And it would be nice to have some semblance of returning to normality again, and hopefully we can all adjust back to reality.
Yeah, there's a part though that we have, a part to this whole plan and across the province, probably across the world, where we have been forced to use virtual meetings. And I don't know that we're ever going to go back to the way it was. I mean, yes, we need public input, but it's kind of nice not having to drive somewhere for a meeting. So I kind of like a piece of that. Mr. Anderson, did you need to respond to something? You've got your...
Safe.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of, I think, efficiencies that can be made with the systems that we had to create over the last year, but that's not this issue. So, anybody else want to speak to it? I, for one, am sure glad to see us going back to that, being able to talk to the public one-on-one. Or, it's not what you said, having enough people in this room with a maximum of 20 in this room alone. So there will be challenges even with that. So I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. Notices of motion? Okay, reports from council. None. Information 11.1 Bench Park Disc Golf Project. Mr. McEwen. No, oh, is there?
Oh,
None there?
We have that one, yes.
And if you, yeah, there. I was gonna say, if you pushed it on, turn the red light on.
Right is rain.
Good to go? Okay. Good afternoon, Your Worship, Council. So I'm here just to talk about, I believe, what was sent to you guys in regards to a letter of information regarding the disc golf course that we are putting in the bench park. So if everything goes well, we're looking at getting the volunteers up this Saturday, volunteers and members of the newly formed Nicola Valley Disc Golf Association. And we are looking at, getting it up and running. So a little bit of history on it is there's a lot of people who have contacted the Recreation Department, and a lot of people have contacted me personally saying, hey, this is a great sport with minimal costs, minimal impact to environment. Why are we not doing this in Merritt? And some opportunities came up to be able to make something like that happen. So did an evaluation of a few areas, working with people that play the game, national champs out of Kamloops, and Western champions as well. So we did a review of a couple locations and came up with that the bench park with its natural settings would be the hands down most ideal spot for this disc golf location to be at.
While I have you here, can you explain where Bench Park is?
Oh, okay,
There's
sure,
a couple
yeah.
of them up there.
So those of you who are familiar with where Bench School is, and then down from Bench School, we have a tennis court, and we have an area that people play floor hockey or road hockey in, and in the wintertime sometimes gets flooded as well. So basically where the school is and the parking lot, there is a line drawn perpendicular straight up and down that divides the tennis court from the rest of the school and the parking lot. Everything to the right of that would be school district. Everything to the left of that with the tennis courts, the ice box area there, and all the way up to Monroe Crescent is all the bench park, city property. So historically an underutilized park, a lot of pine trees in, a lot of pine needles, which suits a disc golf course with the trees. So in this area, we are looking to this Saturday install 9 bases and install 5 existing disc golf holes with the cages. If you're kind of familiar with what those look like, if you Google it, disc golf, it's a thing stands up with this high round on top, has chains hanging down, and a basket in the bottom, and you throw your discs, and they're different weighted discs, and you shoot from a tee-off box, try and get it to the hole, and it hits the chains and falls in the basket, and that's kind of going in the hole like a standard golf sort of thing. So we're looking at installing the 5 holes. They will start on the left over on Gillis Crescent, work your way up, down, back up, back down towards the ice. Done. Up, down, up, down. Yep, up, down, up, down. It was, in order for this project to come to fruition, a donation was made by the filming company that came in and filmed The Good Doctor. Will made contact with them and contacted me and said, hey, there's possibly something in the works, maybe something we can make happen. That company stepped up with a grant, and we're able to make some purchases against that grant to make this happen. Again, getting the word out, what this is about. Another example was today I spoke to Grant Klassen and said, hey, this is what we're doing. Is there anything you can do for us in regards to a skid steer, all the auger attachments, all that stuff? He had a list of questions for me, what is the dirt like up there, blah, blah, blah. And he's coming up at 7 a.m. in the morning with the skid steer and the auger bits, and he is going to volunteer his time and donate the machine's time to the project. So it's going the right direction. The other 7 or 8 volunteers that'll be there, they're members of the newly formed, as well as members, disc golf members from Kamloops enthusiasts that are going to be driving over to assist as well and get it set up and all the cement put in place and everything. So it's some serious ownership in this. And then, I mentioned further demand or strain on public works should be minimized, as there would be quite likely one more garbage can added with a total of 3 being there. And with further fundraising, the group's already chomping at the bit to get another 4 baskets ordered and have them in place. So they're almost ready to check themselves out of their checking account to get it up and running fully functional with 9 holes. But on Saturday, the 9 bases, the hard part, they'll all be put in with caps on top, ground level, so no hazards or anything. Just pop the cap off. Once they bring the new ones in, you put them in, lock them in place, and you'll have your 9 holes set up. And in the meantime, we can start playing with the 5 holes and get people out there trying it out. And that's about it. Any questions?
You mentioned the big boulders beforehand to block off some of the driveways there.
Yeah, we've discussed that. There's a few areas where vehicles are going to park at this park where they traditionally have parked off of Gillis Crescent. And to define a parking area, we're looking at putting some natural boulders in place to stop vehicles from driving any further or entering into the existing roads that are there. And potentially with a plan of, in one area, putting a gate in, the public works to be able to open the gate and access, as well as contacting the school district to ensure that the gate that they have off the end of their parking lot is completed so that vehicles can't just drive off the end of the parking lot and go up as well. So.
And I mention this because as mayor, I've had a number of complaints of some people, some kids, some parties in that area, and they drive into the area, and that's one of the reasons why we're putting boulders in there so they can't drive in. Councillor Christopherson.
Any impact to the neighboring houses at all, or just the comments?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Christopherson, there should not be any impact. We're 30 to 45 feet away with the fairway, which is a natural fairway of a throwing distance from their property lines. Definitely can't guarantee that someone, might accidentally throw this the wrong way type like thing. But again, they're discs, they're frisbees, the course is designed to not be directed at any one property for sure. Designed that way that it should minimize, be 99% that it's not going to, but again, there could be 1 or 2 wayward.
Mm-hmm. And no birds will be hurt in this.
Yeah, see that. Yeah.
I'm glad to see it going through. So
thank you.
Mr. Smith, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to, first off, really thank Sky for working with this community group, particularly because this has been one of the most underutilized parks that the city has. So actually being able to do something with it that is not only going to kind of prevent kind of detractors to the area, like you said, its use primarily has been people hanging out and partying. And so having it where this is going to have real positive community use. And I did want to add as well that this is not necessarily what, there may be an opportunity as part of the North Bench plan still, but this is an opportunity to start generating interest in the sport and see, is this something that Merritt is going to be able to grab hold of and really enjoy, and does it make sense to put in the larger course? And if so, there is the potential option that these it could be left here, it could be moved to another area of the community. It's the best part about how this works. It's really, really low. It's not intrusive in terms of usage of the space. So if this ever needed to be used for another purpose, not a trouble at all with that.
And there's also potential for beginner and more advanced play once you find the second spot. Councillor.
Yeah, thanks, guys. This is fantastic. I mean, this is one of those things that just it comes together in a community where you get that collaboration, that support, and that working together and getting something successfully done in a community. This is just a great example of that. There's groups coming in, they're doing all the work, they're putting it all in, and so we really want to thank them for doing this. This, for a city to have this come in, I mean, it's just, for us, it's just a win-win all the way. The cost factor, the maintenance factor, all that, it's very, very low cost. What's the average cost of one of the baskets? Roughly,
I believe it was off the top of my head, roughly $2,400 for the 5.
For the 5?
For the 5 months.
Well, it's a real shame not to see it completed at 9, and I just like to volunteer. I would like to buy one of the 4 remaining baskets there to volunteer to put one there. Okay, I'd love to see it pulled out to 9, so I will volunteer for pay for one of the baskets.
I really appreciate that. I'll let the group know and I will follow up with you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very
Way
welcome.
to go, Councillor.
Thank you. It's a great thing
I like
that you just developed. Just so many of the things that we look for in the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
So any other questions for Sky? We don't need a motion on this. This is for information only. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, guys.
We move on to 11.2, 2020 development cost charges. And this is, this is Mr. Anderson. Glad you waved.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not to belabor on the previous subject, but Councillor Etchart was correct on the discrepancy between the councillor wages. And there may be one councillor that shouldn't be at the higher rate, and we will work on that. But $18,479 is an annual remuneration for council, and then there is a $223 taxable benefit for some councillors. So that's how that works. The development cost charges report. This report provides some information. For council, does not require a resolution at this time, and you can make a motion at any point to direct us to take action in any manner that you wish. So we collect development cost charges on an annual basis on different development projects in the city of Merritt, and these funds are to offset the costs of increased demands on existing infrastructure, whether it be roads or sewer or water, parks, and so forth. So it's an annual requirement of the Local Government Act that we provide a report with regards to what has been collected over the previous year, and the balance is available at the end of 2020 in this case. So it shows interest credited to the individual accounts in 2020, and then contributions. You will notice on this report there is a negative contribution of $2,948 cumulative in 2020 for DCCs, and interest of $42,902. The negative contribution had to do with the process that we were using to track DCCs in the past. When a developer came forward, we would issue an invoice for the DCCs, and if that project was canceled, then we would credit those charges. So what happened in 2020 is we credited charges that related to a prior year invoice. Now we've changed our process going forward in 2021. So when a development does come forward, we issue a quote for those DCC charges, and we do not issue an invoice until the point that they are ready to proceed with their project. So we won't run into this issue again in the future. So the report itself, the balance outstanding at the end of 2020 is $4,971,270, broken down, as you can see, with roads, water, parkland, drainage, and sewer. The projects that are identified for each of these, we will go through in more detail when we do the DCC review, bylaw review. But I can tell you that what exists out there today in those projects is just approximately about $2 million in sewer projects that were identified in the 2006 report that are still in existence there. So we've got 2.9 million collected on those. So we're funded on those for 2006 dollars. As we know, the 2006 dollars are probably not that significant, but we are not allowed to add cost of living increases onto our DCC balances, which is why it's important to do these DCC reviews on a roughly 5-year basis so that we can make sure that the costs are relevant. The only one that is underfunded in 2006 dollars is drainage, where we have about 170,000 in projects and only 141,000 in that account. The 2021 year to date is $263,000 collected. So congratulations, Don. There's been a big uptick, and those are real dollars, as I mentioned. Those are projects that are underway and not just invoices that are on the books. A big chunk of that relates to sewer. About $226,000 has been added onto sewer. and the other amounts are split between roads and drainage. So that will bring our balance up at this point to over $5.2 million. And I will leave it for council to ask any questions. There's lots of numbers here, so you may want to.
And can I know you're changing the DCC bylaw soon, I hope. And having said that, we also are looking at a different distribution for these funds, right? Because when you go in and dig a road up, you're also going to be looking at roads, water, drainage, sewer altogether anyways. And my understanding is that the funds need to be more evened out. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Your Worship. So 2 brief comments on that. First is we have an outstanding grant application that would cover the costs for a DCC bylaw update. What I will tell you is that it actually, I almost never say this, it may be worthwhile doing this update even before we find out whether these grant funds are coming in or not, because we don't have a clear picture on how long it might take. If this comes through in July, of course, we'd feel pretty darn dumb if we didn't wait. But if it takes until September, November, this is a critical need for the municipality. And so what I think we propose is if we don't hear back by end of July, early August, some kind of reasonable period like that, that we would maybe start the process. Hopefully we wouldn't need to incur costs and just proceed as if those are going to come in on faith, and if they don't, we'll be ready to roll right away. Because we talk about this, it's multiple times a week, the problems that the DCC bylaw creates for us, and some of the funding constraints that we have as a result of not having essential projects listed in our DCC bylaw in addition to the REIT concern. So what we are ultimately going to propose is that we're going to expedite this, but that is going to mean staff bringing something to council at some point in the near future to seek direction to proceed with this. And ultimately we're going to need to do it whether we get the funding or not. So
Thank you. Councillor Lanki.
2 quick questions, and I can have a motion. So one quick question, I guess, is these are the statutory requirements as per the community charter. Is that right, Wayne?
Yes, through Councillor Love. These are statutory reserves.
Yeah, so these are the minimum. We can always add to these, can we? Or is that allowed? I just want.
We add to them based on the rates that are set in the DCC bylaw. So as we modify the DCC bylaw, there's no limitation on how much we can collect.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It does.
Let me be clear on that. It wasn't about the money. I know how that works and everything. It's about if we want to add like a new arena or something like that. Can that be a DCC? Just clarification. Would that be a DCC charge we could add in? Yes.
Mr. Smith?
It's just for clarification.
So what I would like to do is when we bring this forward, let us bring you a report on DCCs, what reserves we can end up doing, because this is a question that's now come up in a couple different settings. So allow us to not answer it piecemeal, but give you a full, here's the full scope of what you can and can't do with DCC funds, because again, there is some statutory restrictions on what you can collect DCCs for and how they're allocated. And it has to be the short of it, it has to be for a project that is in the DCC listed project bylaw, but there are still some restrictions on what projects can be in that bylaw. So we will bring you a full report on what's a go and what's a no-go for that purpose.
I'd like to move a motion then.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, we're not, can you hold off on that motion?
I will hold off on the motion.
Thank you.
Come
Councillor
back to me.
Edgar.
Well, I guess my question was, in the DCC bylaw and then our reserve bylaw, that's something completely different. So the arena situation would be something completely separate. This is just so that if we can review the DCC bylaw so that we have our projects listed and maybe look at realistic amounts, looking at costs or.
Yes, Councillor. Obviously, we need to update the DCC bylaw to reflect current costs, and it primarily relates to infrastructure. So it's roads, it's drainage, it's parks, it's sewer, it's water. Does not typically, and I don't know if it will, relate to things like arenas and fire halls and those sort of things. those things would be set up through the reserves that we have in place now. So if we want a new arena, we'd start funding the arena reserve and fire hall, fire equipment and so forth. So those reserves are separate from the DCCs, and they're there for a reason of other capital projects we may want to pursue.
But maybe in the DCC bylaw review, we could maybe address that we want to, with our map that we got, showing the piping with the different colors on it. I think it was showing the infrastructure map that Public Works gave us. Then we would just address projects.
Correct. I mean, it's to like Boat Street, for example, improvements on Boat Street, that's infrastructure related, no different than the pipes in the ground and in other areas of town that are serviced.
Older, yeah, maybe
good examples.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor White. Councillor White.
Mr. Anderson, when the DCCs, why for 2020 did we just designate the 3 different areas and not all of them?
Through to Councillor White, are you referring to the fact that 3 areas went up in 2020 and other ones didn't have impact?
Well, yeah, did I misunderstand?
No, you're correct. I mean, based on the particular projects, there may or may not be like contributions to parkland and other areas, and I'll let Don MacArthur speak to that.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor White. That's very perceptive. There are, we collect funds based on our current DCC's bylaw that is not new. It's a 2006 bylaw for roads, for drainage, and for sewer. We don't collect for water or for parkland, and the reason for that is the projects that were identified at the time. There wasn't a need to collect additional funds at that time when the bylaw was created. The issue with not updating the DCC's bylaw every 5 years, like we should do, is that you then may have projects that need to be funded that are not being identified, right? Because you can't direct funds to anything that is not identified in the bylaw itself, and specifically projects that are attached to that bylaw. So this is a great need for us to update this bylaw. It's been on my priority list since I arrived, and I know that all the staff team, it's been a priority for us. So as we work through the bylaws in sequence, the OCP obviously is that high level piece, and so the OCP policies are very important when you're creating a DCC's bylaw as well, because you want to link the DCC's projects with the goals of the OCP. And as well, we are currently developing a 10-year capital plan, so that comes into it as well, right? So, but it's become very urgent, this particular bylaw, because of all of the development that's going on in the community right now and all the applications that we have in. And of course, some of those larger projects have come to council recently. So yeah, there's certainly a necessity there, and we will be looking to have water and parkland charges in future based and projects associated with those.
Okay, thank you.
And having said the capital plan, that is where we're looking at the ability to have reserves by bylaw as well, so that we can fund long-term capital plan through reserves in the future. But again, that report hasn't come brought to us yet. You're not ready? Yes.
Not ready for the reserve evaluation at this time, but yes, that's correct. And there are some DCCs that are out there that would probably fall into the capital side. We've got the Boat Street corridor, we've got lights at Boat and Grimmett, we've got a left turn at Nicola Valley Health Center, we've got some sidewalks. So there are, there's about $600,000 worth of DCCs there that might actually apply to Boat Street Phase 2 that we'll be able to utilize even if the DCC bylaw isn't done until 2022. So there is some ability to pull some money from DCCs.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, did you have
Yeah, I just really wanted to say that these 5 categories really are the only 5 categories you can collect and spend on. Where the wiggle room comes in is on parkland. It works for both the acquisition but also the improvement of parkland. And I've seen some pretty creative stretches on what constitutes improvement of parkland for how DCCs are set out. So again, is an arena going to constitute improvements of parkland? The answer is no. But you can keep stepping it back from there, and by the time you start getting to like our multi-use sports box, you've got a real debate as to whether that constitutes an improvement in parkland or not. So that's why I hate when I feel like I'm answering a skirting around a question, but that's where the wiggle room is. Everything else is really quite black and white as to whether you can and can't spend funds on it. So.
Okay, I think we've gone gamut. We're back to you, Councillor Luck.
Thank you, Mayor. So I would like to move a motion that staff start the process immediately of reviewing and updating the DC bylaw. And I think Mr. McCarthy, you made some of the comments that I did. We can't afford to wait any longer.
Are you needing a motion?
I move that motion.
Can I wait to see if we've got a seconder for that? Okay.
And the reason is that Mr. McCarthy has spelled out the reasons where our development is moving quickly here, and we're getting a lot of discussion from the public. Well, you know, the city's we got to pay for this and that. Well, this really answers those questions about who actually pays for upgrades to sewer and water and that. And this is part of that process. So I don't think we can wait for a grant to come in or anything. We need to get started as soon as possible on this. So that's why I'm supporting this motion. Give staff the ability to do that.
I just don't know that we're already starting the process. The process. Well, it could very well. On the other hand, staff are already more than starting the process.
What I will say is this is already in the budget for this year. So this is actually already on the docket as a project for this year. So this isn't a question of whether it's going to happen. And so we don't actually technically even need council direction in order to do it. But what I will say is because you can't expend grant dollars retroactively, there's some things that we could do. We could do a lot of the prep work potentially. We could even bring it forward to the point of RFP. But the problem is once you incur a financial commitment, if that grant isn't in, we lose the opportunity to potentially allocate grant funding. So I think that there is going to be an opportunity for us to overlap a little bit, but we've maybe got a month and a half worth of kind of lead up time before we're going to start incurring expenses. And so the goal is going to be to have that month and a half of lead up time right as the grant starts landing on the table and you've got a check that's ready to cut as soon as you get an announcement. So that would be the dream scenario. And I really do want to assure council that we're very mindful of the fact that this needs to happen as soon as it possibly can.
So I'll withdraw my motion then. It's a timing issue. Okay, great.
Yeah, and we already approved it. So there's no motion needed on this. It was just for information. Now we come to 11.3, our annual report. And I have to say, kudos to staff. It's a good looking document and it actually reads very well. Thank you for putting the effort into this. It's a document we can be proud of. Anybody have anything? I just want to read one of the comments in here. Talked about every city is either vibrant these days or is working on a plan to attain vibrancy soon. The reason is simple. A city isn't successful, isn't even a city really, unless it can lay claim to being vibrant. And that was Thomas Frank, and that was part of a quote that was put in our annual report, and it just struck me as where we are. We are trying to gain that vibrancy and move forward. Any comments? Well, thank you for that, and we will. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was waiting for everybody else.
I didn't.
But there's some good stuff happening in council tonight, so I'm pretty excited about some of these things. And the report, I've been waiting for the annual report for some time, and there's just some good things happening in here. And you know, the fire department rescue, you can't go without recognizing them. I mean, their incidents went from 791 in 2019, they went down to 670. I think that was the right number there. Now, if this falls through, down to 671. So it looks like the trend is down there. If I'm reading that right, I hope I am.
Can I respond a little bit to that? It was not due to them not being able.
Oh,
It
no.
was due to the restrictions put on them during COVID
Okay.
timeframe.
Well, I was just wondering about that.
They
You know,
were
was there-
removed from medical calls and then they
Yeah,
got them
yeah.
back again.
Okay, so that there was some indication there was that education, prevention, those kind of things. And then, of course, you know, the area that I really like a lot was, you know, was planning and some of the numbers. What I'm really going to be interested in is seeing the report next year and see how the numbers change from 2020 to 2021. And I understand from Mr. MacArthur, we're already blowing the 2020 numbers out of the water as far as like, we've done more work in the first 6 months of this year than we did all of last year. Is that right? Am I close to that, or you can correct me?
Mr. MacArthur.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor-elect. That is the general trend. We've surpassed a number of our goals in this report already as of the end of May. Yeah, it's looking like next year the stats there for the Planning and Development Services Department are going to be quite amazing, if I may say so.
You may.
And that's really a testament not only to the staff in the Planning and Development Services Department, but the entire city team, because our department really relies on all of the other departments to provide support and comment, and we really rely on that collaboration with staff throughout City Hall and all of the departments at the city. So I really can't thank our staff enough for the hard work that everyone has done over the last year.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that, and when you talk about that a little bit more, I mean, that economic growth means jobs, it means housing, it means economic development, it means more taxes for the city too. So that's where the boots hit the ground in your department. They're bringing all these people with all the other staff too. So it's a great report. There's some really good information in there. I hope the public goes through and looks at some of that things there, because you know, a lot of this stuff too is the background stuff I've been talking about. It's stuff that the public doesn't see. New OCP, new zoning, and all those kind of things. Those are the, you know, like how can I take a picture with a new zoning bylaw? It's not a sexy thing, but this is the stuff that's really, really important to the running of an effective city hall and a city. So thank you everyone for this. It's a great report. Some good things in there. Thank you.
Well, in talking about aerial or whatever, we have some great aerial shots from our new folder of, what are those machines called?
Drone.
Drones, yeah. So thank you, Mr. Lois, for some of those overhead shots.
Yeah, you're welcome, Your Worship.
Good stuff.
So, and again, kudos to all the staff. We know that this is not just a senior management report. This is all the staff working together to pull it together, and we thank you all. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. And we as staff really do appreciate your comments and your recognition of the fact that despite the fact 2021 is the one that we are all going to want to you can really attach that to us. You will see in this report, by comparing it via previous years, that there is a degree of substance that may not have always been present. There are so many things happening in each department, and I encourage you, look at what's happening in public works, you look at what's happening in recreation, in addition to what you said for fire and planning and development. But even pick any spot in here. We've got community policing, and I think that there's some exciting initiatives happening, and we very much encourage the public to get involved. If there's one of these that is an area of passion for you, you know, we may have opportunities, as you just heard today. Hey, there's a park space that's being underutilized. Let's talk about how we can better utilize that. We're very open to these types of things and making some exciting things happen in the city. And so I could not be more proud of the work that the team has put in across the board in each department this year. And I'd really like to thank them for their efforts, and for the actual compilation of the annual report. I'd really like to thank Mr. Lois for putting that together as well, because having done it before, it's a big undertaking. So thanks to him.
It is. Thank you. So I have lost my ability to get into eScribe, but I believe that we are moving into a closed camera meeting, a closed head camera.
special.
Thank you, Your Worship. So at 5:30, you opened and immediately went into recess on a special in-camera meeting due to the members present. You have not yet gone into closed session in that. So I would advise you what you need to do at this stage is to terminate the annual meeting that you are currently in, at which point you will automatically resume at the special meeting and then move that be closed on the basis provided, which I believe was Community Charter Sections. And that
I need to go into the other agenda.
Section C and G. So, as I terminate the annual meeting that you're currently in, and then we'll immediately be in the special meeting.
Okay, thank you. So I terminate this meeting. And we'll have 5-minute break.
What's the schedule space for the budget? And what was that in the calendar? Well, it's not in this was.
So we are back in session. 2.1, oh, we don't need a close the meeting.
Yes, Your
we do.
Worship. Yes.
2.1, that this meeting be closed to the public pursuant to section 91C, labor relations or other employee relations, and 91G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality of, and both those sections were from the community charter. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Locke and Etcher. And